Welcome to another of the Good Projects professional development sessions. Today's session is about responsibility. We're going to look at how the Good Project has conceptualized responsibility based on research. We'll then do a reflective exercise in which we think about our own responsibilities as educators. And then finally, we'll apply a responsibility framework to a dilemma exercise and think about how we can use a thinking routine to analyze that dilemma in conjunction with responsibility. First, we wanted to start with this powerful question. To whom or what are you responsible in your work? This is a question that the Good Project asked many interview participants in our original research spanning decades. And what we found is that people tended to answer this question in very different ways. Some people spoke about responsibility to people who are close to them, to themselves. Some people spoke about responsibility to a particular organization or workplace that they were a part of. Some people also spoke about a responsibility to the wider world, to communities that they were members of. Some people spoke about a responsibility to their faith or their God. And based on all of these different responses, we created this conception of responsibility as a set of rings that are nested within one another. We call this the rings of responsibility model. And you can see here that the point of this responsibility model is to think about how our responsibilities may ripple outwards. So first at the center, we have this idea of a responsibility to oneself. Then at the next level, we have responsibility to others, maybe those who are close to us. Those could be family and friends, coworkers. Then we have responsibility to community. Maybe that's our organization. Maybe it's particular hobby groups or particular places where we live. Maybe a community being a neighborhood. Then the profession that we're a part of. So maybe as educators, we might have a responsibility to what it means to be an educator beyond a particular school that we work in. We have an idea of what it means to be a good educator. And then finally, a responsibility to the wider world. Maybe we have a sense of what it means to be a global citizen for ourselves, what it means to be someone who's connected with people on a national level or beyond. So these rings interact and may have particular dimensions that each one brings to the fore and maybe cause us to think in different ways about our responsibilities, but often each one of these rings is present in a particular scenario. And in our research, we noticed that views of responsibility tended to change across ages. So whereas younger people, adolescents, tended to think most about those inner rings, their self and their close others, maybe friends, family, students who they were interacting with on a daily basis, older people tended to think more about those outer rings. So thinking about what it meant for them to be a member of a particular profession, a member of an organization, and also how their actions affected the wider world. I would note that it's developmentally appropriate for younger people to be thinking mostly about themselves and their close others as they form their identities and as they go through the normal process of identity development and self-development. That's kind of what we would expect as a pattern. But also, it's the case that not every young person might fit that pattern. For example, there are a lot of young people who take part in social movements and who are really thinking widely about those outer rings of responsibility, what it means to be a member of a civic community or what it means to tackle global issues. There are many young people who do that. But on the whole, we saw that students and younger people tended to think most about those inner rings. So part of the purpose of what we're hoping at the Good Project is that we can prompt people, young and older, to be thinking about both the inner and the outer rings in their decision-making and in their work. And this is related to ethics. So back to the three dimensions of good work that we talked about in our previous professional development sessions, those being excellence, ethics, and engagement. On the Good Project, we often think about ethics through the lens of responsibility. So it's challenging to do good work ethically without paying attention to your responsibilities. And that's because to be ethical, it really entails thinking about how your decisions affect other people. And those include people close to you, but also people wide from you, and also how your actions affect the world. So those wider rings of responsibility, it's important when you're making ethical choices or making ethical decisions or facing ethical dilemmas to really be considering how do my actions affect those outer rings. And this is just to say again, responsibility involves a recognition that we are all part of interconnected systems that includes with other people, but also with different layers of policies, organizations, systems that we're taking part in, and that might have an effect on others. And the way that we act within those systems can bring in different layers of responsibility and might have different effects depending on the decisions that we make. When responsibilities conflict, we might face a dilemma. So this is often the case that when we feel that there's some type of disjointedness or misalignment between particular responsibilities, when maybe a responsibility to self is not in alignment or has a competing set of priorities than a responsibility to the wider world, we face a difficulty or a dilemma, that being a situation in which we might struggle with competing choices, priorities, or values, and that cause us to feel maybe paralyzed. And part of what the Rings of Responsibility framework can do is to bring in a way to analyze where those responsibilities are in conflict and how we can navigate those different responsibilities. And these situations are not uncommon. We've probably all faced scenarios in which we have had competing responsibilities. So for example, just a few ideas here. Competing responsibilities could show up in any of these ways. You might ask yourself, should I speak up when I feel my colleagues aren't being empathetic to a student? Maybe your idea of what it means to be responsible to yourself as a good educator is to bring empathy to your practice, and you feel a responsibility to your students, but maybe you also feel a responsibility to your colleagues that would conflict in bringing up a potential problem to them. Should I tell the truth or remain quiet to protect a coworker who is a friend? Maybe you feel a responsibility to someone who's close to you in those inner circles of responsibility, someone who you interact with as a friend, but maybe you feel as though they aren't doing work that serves your community or your organization well. How do you navigate that? And should I take a flight to my business meeting when I'm concerned about my carbon footprint? So maybe you feel a responsibility to go to a particular meeting in order to serve yourself, your learning, your community at work, but you're worried about the effect that this has and your responsibility to the wider world and your carbon footprint contributing to climate change. How do you navigate that situation? As educators, we all probably face many different decisions and conflicts of responsibility like this. So just want to take a moment to pause here and ask yourself, or if you're in conversation with others in the moment and can have a group discussion, where do your responsibilities lie on this diagram? Do your responsibilities cross all of the circles, or do they involve only some of them? Which of your responsibilities feel like they maybe are in harmony? So do you feel like maybe between yourself and the others that you are close to working with in your educator community, do you feel like those responsibilities are in harmony? Do other people have maybe different views of those responsibilities? Do the responsibilities you have conflict? And the final question, where do your responsibilities feel like they are conflicting? So maybe oftentimes you face particular dilemmas related to the interactions between different responsibilities and these different layers. What are some things that you've experienced as an educator? So take a moment to pause here, and you can either do some journal reflection on your own, maybe mapping out on this rings diagram. You can draw it on a piece of paper and kind of write your responsibilities into each one of these layers, or you can have a conversation with a partner or with others. And when you're ready, you can come back and move forward in the video. So next we wanted to apply the rings of responsibility to a particular dilemma scenario, now that you've had a chance to think about how the rings apply to your own practice. So this is a scenario which you can pause and read about a construction worker or someone who works for a construction company, and she's involved in on-site inspections. And this is during the COVID-19 pandemic, and she struggles with a decision about whether to go on a trip when she knows that she might be exposed to COVID-19 due to the risk of COVID-19 around this time, or whether she should pass up a trip, but maybe there will be some negative ramifications for her at her workplace as a result of that. How should she navigate this situation? So take a moment to pause and read this story, and then we'll look at a visual organizer. Once you've read the story, you can use this options diamond in order to think about Miranda's choice and her competing responsibilities. So on the left-hand side, we have one choice. This is an either or choice. On the left, you can see she doesn't travel. Maybe that results in some work relationships damaged. Maybe she'll lose that promotion she was hoping for, but she also remains safe from COVID. If she travels, she might get sick. Maybe she could infect other people who are close to her. However, she would be getting a leg up at work. So you can think about this either or choice, and there may be some additional things you would add to both of these lists based on whether she travels or doesn't. I want you to think about what you would put at both of these other nodes of the diamond. So how could she maybe reach a compromise between not traveling at all or just going with the flow and traveling that could serve her based on her responsibilities? And then maybe are there solutions that we haven't thought of? An example of this could be perhaps her workplace could devise some kind of travel policy or routine for people who don't feel comfortable traveling due to COVID-19. Maybe there's a way to think about this need for inspections in a different way. What could her workplace do with her, or what could she do in order to create solutions? So take a moment to use this options diamond and think about what Miranda's choices could be, how she could balance her various responsibilities. So you want to be thinking about that. And you want to use the rings of responsibility diagram to map all of that out as well. Some questions that will guide you in this are, what are Miranda's compromise options? What are her solution options? What responsibilities is she balancing? And what decisions could she make in light of her responsibilities? And I should note you can use the link at the bottom of the slide here in order to access the guide to this thinking routine if you'd like some closer directions and to read them. So pause the video here and use the diamond in order to think about Miranda's dilemma. And then when you're ready, you can come back. So you've probably now talked about Miranda's dilemma or thought about Miranda's dilemma on your own. I want you to now consider, how could you use this exercise with your learners or colleagues? Or what else are you doing to explore responsibilities and decision-making with your learners? So you might think about ways to apply this particular exercise or an exercise like it in your classroom. Or you can also think about, what are the things I'm already doing that I can amplify that are related to the rings of responsibility diagram, helping people think about varying responsibilities and how their decision-making might influence those various rings that I can bring forward in my classroom and really make apparent to my learners. Again, with the goal being that we're going to be helping people through thinking through responsibility, make better decisions in the future when they consider the impacts of their actions on both those inner and those outer rings. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope this has been helpful and maybe helped you think about responsibility a little bit more deeply, both for yourself and how you can be talking about responsibility with your learners.